Hi, I'm Belinda. I'm the CEO of Autism Step Australia. I'm based in Sydney, Australia. Today, I'd like to share with you my project called Ask Me What I Need. This is an autism and awareness training program for emergency services. It's designed only as an awareness program. We have developed a full training program that is being released throughout Australia that will cover all the training aspects that emergency services personnel, volunteers, and those in hospitals, doctors, nurses, and security should know what to look out for if they're working with or have identified a person that identifies as autistic or neurodiverse. I hope you enjoy this program. There is a video throughout the program, and this video has a survey monkey attached to it that it'd be really great if you could go to the survey monkey and share your thoughts about the video. I need to explain that I'm actually at the end of the flu, so I may cough or sneeze throughout, so I apologise. Let's see how we go. Welcome. So, as I said, Ask Me What I Need, Autism Awareness Training for Emergency Services. This program was originally funded under the joint state and national Commonwealth Disaster Resilience Program in Australia. It won the State Community Resilience Award and also won the National Resilience Award 2020. Recently, it has also been awarded the National Bank of Australia State Community Award, the NAB Award, National Australia Bank. Let's see how we go. So the workshop and training video that is included today is designed to create awareness of the needs of autistic youth and adults during a disaster, hazard, emergency or relief operation. As Commissioner Shane Fitzsimmons stated, they're the little things that can make all the difference to somebody's anxiety, to somebody's decision-making, and ultimately has the potential to determine whether people live or don't live in really traumatic or horrific experiences. We are all experiencing greater and more often natural disasters within our world. Recently, where I live, in the last 18 months, we have had devastating fires and 4 floods that have rocked the community and displaced over 50,000 people, destroyed property and destroyed infrastructure. So we're very aware of what can happen nearby. So firstly, why was this project needed? People with disability have been excluded from the community preparedness activities, which has created inequitable disparities in survival. People with disability are at higher risk of injury or morbidity than the general population in disasters. Sydney University have developed the PCEP program. This is the Personal Centred Emergency Preparedness Program, which I am accredited facilitator for. This is to help people design and be prepared for emergencies themselves. If people know what to do themselves, they're going to be a help, they're going to help others, and they're also going to be able to direct emergency services of what their needs are. People with disability are the first to be left behind and the last to be rescued, and their rights to protection and safety are often denied. People with disability are 2 to 4 times more likely to die in a disaster than the general population. So we also need to look at the definition of autism spectrum disorder so we know who we're talking about. According to the DSM-5, autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disorder characterised by difficulty with social and communication skills. It may display a variety of repetitive behaviours. In the late 1990s, Judy Singer, a sociologist and a colleague and friend of mine, who is autistic, came up with a word to describe conditions like ADHD, autism and dyslexia. This word was neurodiversity. Her hope and objective was to shift the focus of discourse about ways of thinking and learning away from the usual litany of deficits, disorders and impairments. Neurodiversity is an approach to learning and disability that argues diverse neurological conditions are a result of normal variations in the human known. What many people imagine when they hear autism spectrum is mild and severe and high functioning and all those other horrible terms. What it may actually look like is issues with language, motor skills, sensory, perception, and executive functioning. Functioning can depend on the environment, how the person is on the day, if there are other stresses involved, how their health is, and generally what's happening. So let's think if you're having a good day, you could be getting through the day fairly well, doing what needs to be done, eating, sleeping, working, studying, whatever you need to do. However, you throw an emergency, you throw a flood in that comes in overnight, and your whole world is rocked. So not only will you not know what to do, but your motor skills may be uncoordinated, your sensory sensitivities may be heightened, your perception of not knowing where you are and what's happening or things around you may be unbalanced. Your executive functioning, how do I plan what I do? How do I plan for this day that's gone upside down? Will be all miscrewed. And your language, you may not be able to communicate. So the objective of this project was to provide awareness and acknowledgement of the needs of autistic adults when they're placed in an emergency environment. For emergency services personnel to implement appropriate strategies as required. The strategy is to ask the person what they need. This will save time and it will save lives. So in doing the project, we did a lot of community consultations, we did online surveys, we went out and met people. And what the people said they wanted more was preparedness for themselves and training for emergency services. Some participants didn't get assistance in an emergency because they were too stressed to express their needs. Their general preparedness skills are low and people would like training. Best practice is required. Training about autism for emergency services and evacuation centres to have rooms and resources that are appropriate for their needs. From the emergency services perspective, the surveys demonstrated that an overwhelming majority of people have not received any staff development training in autism. Those that have had training, they've mainly attended programs or workshops, professional developments for their regular jobs. So to explain, in Australia, majority of people working in emergency services are everyday people that volunteer. They volunteer to fight bushfires, to rescue people, to run emergency evacuation centres. They are not all trained and paid employees. 75% of participants would like to complete autism awareness training. And there was one comment, of those that did not want to do the training, they commented that it was not within their role or felt the others were more suitable to do this. They actually forgot that emergency services means that you're there for everybody and you need to look at everybody's needs. The most identified benefits for training would be to provide a safer environment for people when faced an emergency hazard or disaster. And again, to save time and save lives. There's a growing evidence of need. The growing body of literature addressing the psychological condition, which is the consequence of a previous disease or injury of children and adolescents after natural disasters. The effect on recovery is extreme. The literature completely lacks any description of adaptive outcomes for autistics after natural disasters. Searches in Australian literature and related sites found that there have been no studies conducted that mention people with disabilities at the time of the project. The Royal Commission into the Natural Disasters Arrangements report was one report with no mention of people with disabilities, and the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience, that holds a lot of the research, had no results when one searched for autism. Here is the video to show you. Please be aware that I have had some trouble getting back to the slides after the video. I hope you enjoy this.
As emergency services staff and volunteers, it's important to note that the behaviours, reactions and coping strategies from people with autism will vary. Autism is a spectrum. As people on that spectrum, we don't necessarily react the same way in certain situations or display the same behaviours. While every situation will be different, there are some key understandings, techniques, and approaches you can implement to help an emergency situation be safer for everyone involved.
My name is Jade. I'm autistic. I was in my early 20s when I found out that I had autism.
I'm Hayden, and I'm autistic. I'm a professional mentor that works with adolescents and young adults on the autism spectrum. It's considered an invisible disability. I mean, it's not something that, unless you're trained to look for it, that most people are going to observe. There's a number of behaviours that can give it away, so to speak. The first thing I watch for is the way they walk, how they're moving through their environment, shuffling back and forth or an awkward manner, or they're responding too slowly. Also how they might respond to sounds or various stimuli. You might find that they cover their ears if they hear a car horn, or that they might be squinting at fluorescent lights. They'll be reacting to their environment in a non-typical way. One of the things to look for is what's called in the community stimming. So you might find they're repeatedly stroking a piece of skin. Mine, especially when I'm quite burned out, tapping my collarbone, tapping at pieces of my skin, or occasionally it'll trigger my tics, as you've just seen.
I'm more likely to have a meltdown or to shut down completely and isolate myself and not talk to people.
We encourage all of our Red Cross volunteers and staff to focus on the person in front of them, to get to understand what's happening for them and how we can best support them.
Whenever we arrive at a scene, we need to prioritise our actions. We're quite adept at asking questions. We need to give them time to answer. Their processing might take a little bit.
Even if they're not responding to you, just keep talking to them, reassure them that you're not there to hurt them, that you're there to help them.
If we do need to touch them, we need to ask, say, do you mind? This is what we're going to do. We need to give you some help, but don't worry, we are here to help. These noises that our equipment is going to make is normal. Don't be scared. It's going to be loud, but it's a necessary thing that we need to do to help you get out of this situation that you're in.
We stress to our volunteers the importance of staying with the person, but also to ask them, is this working for you? Is this the right plan for you? Do you need us to do something different?
Another good thing we can do is offer them some water. That builds that trust between us as the rescuer and them as the casualty or the victim.
One of the best things you can do is try and figure out what the stimulus is, then remove the client from it. You're not going to be able to treat somebody in the presence of something that overwhelming.
So many autistic individuals may have one of three responses to an emergency, hazard or disaster. That could be the fight, where they're going to resist you, the flight, where they're going to try and escape to a safe place, or the freeze, where they may have what we call situation mutism.
Generally, when a client's in a flight response, it's a case of, I have to get away from something and I have to get away from it now. The approach of your vehicle actually might be the triggering stimulus that causes that flight response. Another thing to keep in mind is that in order to escape that stimulus, they may run into a situation of greater danger.
If we've been made aware that someone is autistic and that they have fled the scene or are hiding, we need to look for the most likely places that we could find them. Checking under beds, in cupboards. It's not a fear of us personally, but they just feel overwhelmed and they need to remove themselves from this situation to where they feel safer.
Generally, autistic people seek out a sensory neutral environment. Often that's a place near water. Water seems to be something which is universally soothing and calming to people on the spectrum. So if there's an autistic person that's missing, look for a nearby water source.
So check in, ask the questions, and get that feedback so we know if we're on the right track.
So we also need to add to one of the 5 Fs that there's also flop and fawn. So people can react in all different ways. So in this autism awareness training video for emergency services, the main takeaways are that autism is a spectrum, it's an invisible disability. Everyone is an individual. Look out for people with non-typical movement, reduce sensory overload, search in bodies of water, and always ask the person, what do you need? Remembering autism is a spectrum, and on that day, in that situation, the person could be anywhere on the spectrum. So there's often a theory called the spoon theory. So you start off the day pretty bright, hopefully, and you have so many spoons, and those spoons diminish as you face each challenge. So if you have a whole lot of those challenges all at once, you're running on empty. You have no fuel to continue. You have no fuel to find the words or find the energy to move. Just remember where a person may be at and that everyone is an individual. Most autistic adults have sensory issues. This can be hyper or hypo sensitivity to light, sound, touch, and smell. Their physical orientation may be unusual and they may not be aware of where they are or where they need to be. Their movement may also be impaired. They may not identify the usual signs of danger, such as smoke, and their interoception may have difficulties not identifying when they're thirsty or when they're hungry or when they need to go to the bathroom. Often people can display an unusual or atypical gait due to a lower balance point, arm movement, or when you're overloaded or in a meltdown, people can appear like they're drunk, and especially when they're burnt out. Communication may be verbal, may be hyperverbal, where they can't stop talking. Their language processing, there may be a latency in responses. literal comprehension and responses may be not what you're expecting. There may be selective mutism, situational mutism. The person may be non-verbal or non-speaking. They may usually use alternative augmentative communication systems, which they may not have with them in that emergency. They may be non-electronic systems, or they could be electronics or apps like iPads. Note, if you're going to take anything away from this video, the most important thing is that drowning is the leading cause of death among children with autism. Autistic children are 160 times more likely to die by drowning. Autistic children often wander away from safety, either to escape discomfort or to reach a place of intense interest, which may be water. By removing themselves from the dangerous situation, they may be placing themselves in greater risk. The rescuer may be perceived as the danger. Recovery. Sensory social burnout is a primary cause of adults on the spectrum missing work, school, or other obligations. There must be adequate time and an environmental conducive to sensory recovery. When the negative stimulus ceases without recovery, sensory burnout will occur. Even though that stimulus is gone, the person needs to recover. So what do you need to know today? You need to ask the person, what do you need? So remember the 5 takeaways from this session. Think about your colleagues that are in emergency services. They may be neurodiverse. Do you need to adapt your training? Would you like more in-depth information and training from any part of this presentation? My website is here. Please contact me. I would appreciate you completing the brief survey monkey from today's presentation. Thank you.